And now let's bring in the House Republican leader, Steve Scalise. Congressman, thank you for joining us this morning. You just heard John Feiner. Your response?
Well, George, good to be with you. And first of all, we wanted to make sure that we quickly got relief to Israel. We've been working with the Israeli government on the specific requests that they've had, replenishing the Iron Dome, replenishing David Sling, some other strategic missile systems that they are using right now. Look, I met with some of the families Friday, George, of those victims, those hostages, people who died in the attack on the 7th. And they want relief. They want their families back. And that's why this talk of a pause needs to stop. Hamas needs to be eliminated. Hamas, working with Iran, has been plotting and planning for months, if not over a year, to invade Israel. And Israel has a right to defend themselves, and we in the Congress stand right behind them in their efforts to fight this war and win this war. It's going to be a long war, and it's a conflict that we are with Israel on every step of the way.
But as you know, this funding request that you've put through is dead on arrival in the Senate. You've tied the aid to Israel to cuts in IRS enforcement, which is designed to go after wealthy tax cheats. Why combine those two? Is the new speaker prepared to put clean funding for Israel on the floor of the House?
Well, actually, even the CBO says that some of that money would be going after low and middle income families. But at the end of the day, we passed a bill that addressed two problems that our Defense Department talks about. One, we need to get aid to Israel, and we do. But when our generals come and testify before committees like Armed Services, they say our debt is our biggest national threat, not other countries like China, Russia. They say it's our debt. We addressed both in this bill, and we got a bipartisan vote, George, and I think that's important too.
But let me just stop you. Let me just stop you right there. You say you addressed the debt. In fact, and you're the one who referenced the CBO. The CBO said that this proposal you put on the floor that you passed the House is actually going to increase the deficit, not reduce the debt.
Well, only CBO would say reducing the size of government.
But you just cited the CBO. That's their analysis. It's going to reduce it because you're taking away enforcement.
But the CBO said it's going to actually hit people making under $400,000 a year with $4 billion in new taxes. That violates President Biden's own pledge, by the way, that he made to low-income families. He promised he wouldn't raise their taxes. CBO said it would be a $4 billion hit to those families. At the end of the day, we passed the bill to give the aid to Israel, and it was a bipartisan vote, and it's over in the Senate. If the Senate has an issue with the bill, they can take it up. If they send it to the president, I have no doubt the president would sign that bill because that gives Israel the aid that they need, again, with a bipartisan vote out of the House.
Congressman, I'm confused. You cite the CBO approvingly when they agree with the proposal, when they agree with your conclusions, and you dismiss them when they disagree?
The CBO has been wrong on a number of fronts, and you can go look at how well that's documented. The bottom line is they do acknowledge that about $4 billion in new taxes would hit low and middle income families. That's something that violates President Biden's own promise he made during the campaign.
They also say quite explicitly it's going to increase the deficit, but we'll move on right now. This week, one of your former colleagues, Congressman Ken Buck, a Republican of Colorado, said he was leaving, retiring from Congress. And here's what he said on his way out.
Our nation is on a collision course with reality, and a steadfast commitment to truth, even uncomfortable truths, is the only way forward. Too many Republican leaders are lying to America, claiming that the 2020 election was stolen.
He said that you're one of those leaders who hasn't been unequivocal in saying it was a clean election, that Joe Biden did not steal the election. Your response?
Well, Ken, I've worked with on a number of issues, including getting spending under control, getting our economy back on track. He's talked about that 2020 election as well. And you and I think have talked about that too. At the end of the day, getting our country back on track is our focus. And that's what we're focused on right now. That's why we're moving bills out of the House to address our open border, which, by the way, you don't see this administration wanting to confront when you have people on the terrorist watch list coming across our open border. We want to get our economy moving again by getting energy prices under control. We just passed a bill Friday that gets no press coverage that stands up to Iran's ability to sell their oil on world markets. They've made $80 billion since Joe Biden took office, selling their oil on world markets and then using that money to fund Hamas and other terrorist organizations. We passed a strong bill with a very bipartisan vote Friday to push back and impose tough sanctions so Iran can't keep making that kind of money. Let's make our energy in America, not let Iran and other bad hostile countries get that money that they use to fund terrorism. Those are bills we just passed. That's what our focus has been on. getting our country back on track and supporting our allies and going after our enemies who are emboldened right now by the weakness from this administration. We need stronger action right now.
Can you say unequivocally that the 2020 election was not stolen?
What I've told you is there are states that didn't follow their laws. That is what the state constitution, the U.S. Constitution requires. I've seen in my own state where we had to send our elections commissioner to jail years ago for fraud and corruption, and we cleaned up our act in our state. Every state ought to follow the laws that are on their books. That's what the U.S. Constitution says.
That's not what I asked. I said, can you say unequivocally that the 2020 election was not stolen?
Look, Joe Biden's president. I know you and others want to talk about 2020. We're focused on the future. We've talked about 2020 a lot. We're talking about how to get our country back on track, how to get our economy moving, how to stand up to the bad actors around the world. Xi is not slowing down in China. He's looking at Taiwan. You see what's going on in Russia. You see what Iran is doing to work with Hamas and other terrorist organizations. This administration needs to pick up the pace. They're not standing up to the bad actors around the world. They need to. We're passing bills to address this through the House. The Senate needs to take action. The president needs to take action as well. That's what we're focused on in the House.
I know that Joe Biden is president. I'm asking you a different question. Can you say unequivocally that the 2020 election was not stolen?
What I've told you, and you've seen this, there are states that didn't follow the laws that are on their books, which is what the U.S. Constitution says they have to do.
So you just refuse to say unequivocally that the 2020 election was not stolen?
So you want to keep rehashing 2020. We're talking
I just want an answer to the question, yes or no.
Threats to this country. We've talked about this before, but again, will you acknowledge that there were states that didn't follow the actual state legislative enacted laws on their books, which the U.S. Constitution says they're supposed to do?
I know that every court that looked at whether the election was stolen said it wasn't, rejected those claims. And I asked you a very, very simple question. Now I've asked it, I think, the fifth time that you can't appear to answer. Can you say unequivocally that the 2020 election was not stolen?
I told you there were a handful of states that didn't follow their laws. The rest did. The rest followed. And again, states that Trump won, states that Biden won that did follow their laws. There were a handful of states that didn't follow the laws that were on the books. They went to secretaries of state to change the rules of the game, and then the voters didn't know what the rules were because ultimately the state laws weren't followed in those states. That's not what the U.S. Constitution says. At some point, we should go back to following the Constitution, George.
The courts have all followed the Constitution. They all rejected the claims you just made. And I just want to say again, for the record.
Or they said there was no standing.
You cannot say that the 2020 election was not stolen. Yes or no, was the 2020 election stolen?
What I've told you is Joe Biden's the president of the United States, and right now he's failing the country on so many fronts that matter to families. We're talking about what matters to families today. You can keep talking about 2020. I'm talking about what's wrong with our country today, how to fix the problems, how to secure America's border. You don't want to talk about that because Democrat mayors across the country are talking about how broken our border is to the point where people on the terrorist watch list from some of these hostile countries are coming into our country today, not just bringing drugs that are killing young people, but people that actually want to do us harm. And this president won't take action. We've passed legislation to fix this problem, to secure our border. The president doesn't want to negotiate with us or with Democrat mayors who are telling him it's a major problem to big cities like New York that we should all be concerned about. So the president can keep talking about the past. You can. We're going to talk about the future and how to help these families who are struggling across America with high gas prices, high prices when they go to the grocery store, every other problem that they're concerned about. That's what we're focused on in this House.
Thanks for your time this morning. Hi, everyone. George Stephanopoulos here. Thanks for checking out the ABC News YouTube channel. If you'd like to get more videos, show highlights, and watch live event coverage, click on the right over here to subscribe to our channel. And don't forget to download the ABC News app for breaking news alerts. Thanks for watching.